I'm Joeita, and this is The Pulse. Cooking is a life skill. If you learn to cook, you inevitably save money, and you could even find yourself in better health because you are in control of what you eat and how it's prepared. Cooking is also a creative outlet, and it can be a source of joy for people who might revel in that perfectly prepared steak or look forward to hosting friends and family around the table. And if you happen to be blind, participating in that most universal of human experiences, cooking and dining, can help change the way blindness is perceived. Blind cooks use a range of techniques to accomplish tasks in the kitchen, often with mouth-watering results. Today, we discuss cooking and blindness. It's time to put your finger on the pulse. Hello and welcome to The Pulse on AMI Audio. I'm Joeita, and if you couldn't tell just from listening to the monologue, I am really pumped about today's show. I wouldn't say that I'm a bad cook or a lazy cook. I would just say that I don't cook because my husband likes to cook, and I've been very happy to give him run of the kitchen. I do the cleanup, but I find that as I'm getting older, that I really want to get into cooking, especially as someone who's blind. I did have a rehabilitation instructor, and they taught me all the skills. They got me a liquid level indicator, and so it's not that I can't cook. It's more that I, for a very long time, didn't cook. And so I've really found that my interest in cooking has peaked in the last little while. My husband's not too happy about it because I've, for all intents and purposes, turfed him out of the kitchen. But to help me unpack some recipes and to talk cooking and to get some tips and tricks about how people who are blind navigate the kitchen with pizzazz, I'm joined today by Renee Rentmeester, who is the creator and executive producer of Cooking Without Looking, a very cool show name. Hello and welcome. I'm so glad you could join us on the program.
Oh, thank you for inviting me, Joeita. I'm very excited to speak with you.
I feel like the title is self-explanatory, Cooking Without Looking. It's a little bit of a nudge to the fact that you're blind, and the show is catered to blind cooks. But give me the elevator pitch about your show. What's it all about?
Well, first of all, I'm not blind, but everyone on our show is blind or visually impaired. It was something that I started because I felt there was a whole group of people left out. And so when I did my research, I found that it was actually very popular on the internet and in the blind chat rooms and everything, and the listservs. So I learned about blindness. The cooking part is actually a unification. We all eat, no matter if we have sight or not, right? So it's a unification part of blind and sighted and backgrounds. And, cooking is just something that unites us, no matter where we come from, no matter who we are. It unites us and it makes us have fun together. And it's also a way of introducing the blind community to, perhaps future bosses, because there's a lot of thinking that's still very old about blindness and people who are blind.
You mentioned that you yourself are sighted, but the show is hosted by a couple of blind hosts. I've seen a few episodes. Sometimes there are 3 hosts and sometimes there are 2. Can you introduce us to the hosts of the show?
Yes, it's Alan Preston and Annette Watkins. Annette has Stargardt's, and Alan has been legally blind since he was very little, since about 2, and it's progressed. They've been with me. We've all been together for the past 23 years. We are a nonprofit, and we do this out of the joy and out of, what we feel is a real mission.
And where can people catch the show? Because I've seen old episodes that were on PBS, and of course, I've caught the YouTube channel. So where all can we find the show if you wanted to listen or watch it?
Well, right. We used to be on PBS. That's where we started. And now we're on YouTube. We've got the Cooking Without Looking YouTube channel. We have, I think, nearly like 130 episodes, and it's helped us get into 73 countries along with the podcast. We have food from around the world featured on there in 8 different countries.
So tell me about the typical show. If I were to listen to just your average Cooking Without Looking episode, what is the format of the show, and who do you tend to bring on as guests? Are you bringing on expert chefs? Are you bringing on blindness instructors? Like, who is it that you're actually talking to? Who's actually cooking without looking?
Well, we bring on anyone who wants to come on. And I'll tell you why. I thought it was a lot more, I thought it was better to have people who were just regular, everyday home chefs. We also we start off, okay, we introduce the home chefs of the day, and they come on. And then sometimes we have experts or doctors or heads of organizations for blindness at the very end of the show, which we call Food for Thought. So it's not as expert driven as it is everyday, regular home chef person driven, because a lot of times, most of the people who reach out to us are just regular people, but for the day, we lift their spirits, and they get to show off what they do. I think a lot of people who maybe take the blindness courses, such as yourself, maybe it's ruled too much by rules. You know what I mean? And we all learn, we all have the things that work best for us, and I thought that was much better to do it that way. Just have a lot of regular blind people give us their tips, and whatever works for you is what works for you, and you do you in the kitchen.
How do you decide on who is an applicant for the show? Because I could tell you, yeah, I would love to be on your show, and I'm a burgeoning blind cook, and I'll make an omelet. And with the omelet, I made one the other day, and it was beautiful. It was just like, it was perfection. Like it was Instagram worthy. And then the one I made yesterday was really kind of so-so. It wasn't even round. It was kind of like a weird pretzel shape or something.
Was that you who reached out online about the how to make an omelet?
Yes,
if you're blind?
And there was the one guy, and there's so many useful tips online as well. And the guys said just leave it in the pan and let it do its thing. And I did, and that's how it turned out beautifully. I think I might have been a little too aggressive, but trying to spoon the egg mixture to the center, and that messed it up. But that aside, when you're thinking about guests, how do you assess who would be a suitable candidate? Because you could have someone whose demonstration goes beautifully, or you could have someone who ends up with, an omelet that looks more like a pretzel.
Well, guess what? We have had all of these people on. The only requisite is that you're blind and you like to cook and you want to be on the show. We have had no problems, and I mean no problems, with people who are blind and cooking on the show. No one's messed up, not horrendously. I do not edit the show if there was a mess up, because we want to be, we're reality driven, right? We don't want to make it seem like, we're perfect and that's why we're on the show. No. Now, the other day, Annette was cooking on the show. She was making her chocolate peanut butter tofu pudding. And
yes, that sounds delicious. I'm going to try that one.
I know, it's really good. And if you're vegan, it's really good for that too. And so what she had done was put her chocolate, her cacao, in a new container, because she had just bought some, and she put them in her new container, and then she forgot where she put it. I left that in because that's real life. That's real life in the blind community. That's real life in my community. We've had things where I know one of our shows we talked about safety and not wearing bare feet and cutting anything. And what I did, I came home from shooting the show and I was cutting something, and I'm always in bare feet. And I dropped a knife, and it just, it didn't hit my foot or anything. Nothing bad happened. But, you know, we just like to show authentically what life in the kitchen is like, no matter if you're blind or visually impaired. We like to keep it authentic.
I'm gonna, in the interests of keeping it real, I'll just come right out and tell you that I am barefoot in the kitchen all the time. Like,
there you
all
go.
the time. But I'm so glad you brought up safety, because I know, at least for my parents when I was younger, being safe is a really big consideration, and that's understandable. That's what parents do. They worry about you. What are some of the tips that you've gained along the way in the several episodes that you've done of the show that has maybe given you a more expansive sense of how blind and low vision cooks can stay safe in the kitchen?
Well, I think one of the things that, knife safety is a biggie. I think that one of the things that is important and may sound antithetical is to always have an extremely sharp knife, because very sharp knives are more important than a knife that's dull, because the dull knife will actually slip off and you could possibly cut yourself. That was one of them. And then cutting like if you're cutting an onion, you know how the onions kind of roll around, a little roly-poly like. Well, what we do is, and I use this myself. Let me tell you, all the tips on the show, I've used all of them at one point or another. It didn't matter, if I'm blind or sighted. A lot of them are really great tips everyone can use. So this was cutting an onion in half, putting the flat side down, and then slicing it as you go along. And it keeps, the onion from sliding. I can do that with an apple or whatever round thing you're trying to cut.
Yeah, I do that all the time. It's the easiest way so it doesn't run away from you.
Right. And another good thing I learned was you don't have to preheat your oven. You can, put whatever it is that you're baking into the oven and then turn the heat on. And something I've added on to that, sort of like a corollary, you don't have to get the food out of the oven immediately, when the buzzer goes off or whatever. Turn the oven off. I do this myself. It's great. You turn it off 5 or 10 minutes before, the time goes off. The heat will remain in there. But when you go to take it out, you won't have that heat, blast you in the face and sort of knock you off guard.
Yeah. What about safety on the stovetop? And remember, now stovetops have changed. When I learned to cook, we were still using the old coil top stoves, just to give you an idea of how old I am. Those and those were easier to manage for a blind cook in a lot of ways, because you could easily plop the pot on the stovetop, because you could tell where the coils were when the stove was cold. And even when it was hot, you could use a spatula to kind of center the pot and make sure it stayed on the flame. Now, of course, everyone's got these ceramic stovetops, and unless you're like me and you did a ton of research to find, this is the one where you can kind of sort of tell where the burners are. How do you actually manage to cook safely on a stovetop when you're blind? You can't actually see the markings for the burners, and you don't really have too many tactile indications.
Well, even with sight, I wouldn't want to use one of those burners. I have a gas stove, which I love to death, because you can basically turn it up as high as you want, turn it down. And I would literally just put my hand maybe 6 inches above, so you can feel where the heat is. There are also little high marks, those little bumps you can put in their position sort of within the neighborhood of where, that circle is. You can do that, or, you can empower a sighted person to help you out and do it, so that you have sort of guides along the way. But I keep things very simple, and I would just say put your hand like maybe 6, 7, 8 inches above, and you can feel where the heat is coming from, and then slide it there, in a pinch if you don't have any guides or markings.
The other common concern that people have in the kitchen, and by that people I mean me, is that my husband and I we are foodies. We like to eat and we do like to cook, and what that entails is buying all of these condiments and sauces and spices. I mean, I've shown people my spice rack, and they just shake their heads. They go, "Oh my God, you have so much stuff." How does I mean, every blind cook is different. I get it, but on average, what are some tips and tricks for the home cook who happens to be blind to organize their pantry and check on their condiments and spices and make sure everything's fresh and up to date?
Well, what you can do is, and I most of my tips are from people who are blind. And so one of the things was to have either like little boxes in your drawer, or, you can label something. I don't know if you read Braille. If you read Braille, you can have like a little label with Braille on it. If you want to keep them well organized, you can put them in a little box in your drawer, just the way you like them. And you can always smell what they are.
Yeah, smell is a huge indicator. I mean, that's how I tell a lot of my spices apart, is just from smelling. And I think one of the things that's interesting about watching your show, and so beneficial to all cooks, is recognizing that you don't have to center vision in cooking. And it is really a 5 senses situation where you're smelling, you're touching, you're listening for things, the splutter of cumin seeds in a pan, or like all of that. How much has it changed the way you cook? Are you cooking with all 5 senses now?
I am. One of my favorite tricks that I've learned is that when something is done cooking, whether it's baking or on the stove, you can smell it. And I never realized that. And that was, a couple of blind cooks who told me about that. On the first Tuesday of the month, I actually have a little cook along with a group from Blind United in California. And so during the month, while I'm cooking, I'm thinking of all the tips I can give them, because I like to keep it simple. If I'm mixing a batter or something, I just use your basic fork. I am like Stone Age. Very, very simple, very non-technological. But if you're a huge techie kind of person and you enjoy that, I found that the air fryer, which I haven't tried yet, is excellent for people who are blind or visually impaired. And they found it's a healthy way of cooking things and having things delicious and crunchy.
Yes, that's right. There's 1 or 2 that are making the rounds, air fryer brands. I'm not going to say their names because I don't need to advertise for them unless they want to pay me to advertise for them. But, they are accessible. A lot of these gadgets and appliances are now controlled using your smartphone or a smart speaker. And so it's a beautiful intervention of technology and cooking. I'm wondering if you're feeling that that's becoming more of a trend now, Renee, with major manufacturers really catering to people with visual impairments, not so much, but maybe, incorporating more of those options, those audio options and tactile options, or if we're moving away from that, because everywhere you go, you're seeing touch screens. So which way is the wind blowing here when it comes to major appliances?
Well, I think you've hit the nail on the head. You made a great point. We did a show a month or 2 ago on different appliances that are accessible. And I think manufacturers are doing a very good job at adding in the accessible touches to their appliances that they're producing. One of the appliances, it was interesting. Bill Bowles actually, the appliance actually had a feature where you just showed the recipe to the appliance, and the appliance set the time, set the temperature, all for you. And I thought that was excellent. And then there's always the talking microwave, which has always been cool. That's been around a while. And if you're a little lonely, you can talk to your microwave while you're making something. So, that's a great point that you're making. People are thinking, companies are thinking more about accessibility than they ever have.
Well, why wouldn't they? I mean, it's an untapped market. One of the things that you mentioned earlier in the conversation, and I wanted to come back to it, is the kind of cuisine you feature on the show. So it's not just North American cuisine, but you're actually trying to have a world cuisine. How intentional is that choice, and what are some of the things you've featured on the program?
Oh, it's very intentional. We've had people from South Africa. We've make some of their food. One of them, I wish I knew how to pronounce it, remember, but it's something so cute. In the native language, it was a grandma in a blanket, and it's like, it was like a meatball and some cabbage and things. And my mom and grandma used to make something like that, only my grandma was from Poland. And so I love having all the different things. We have Jamaica, we had Barbados, we had, let's see, what else besides all of these? Trinidad and Tobago. We just have 8 of them from other shows. And then, like the other day, we had street corn chicken, which was pretty cool, from California. I find that, if I wax philosophical here, if we take a look at everything from all of us from all around the world, our foods are all very similar. And yes, and so we realize that we're also very similar. We are one, and we are also one in our foods, and the food is actually very, very telling of how close we all are. So look at, here's my grandma from like in the 1960s making these things, and she's from Poland, and then here are the people today from South Africa making something very similar, only calling it a very cute name, like grandma in a blanket. And so, I think it just makes everything a lot more interesting, a lot more fun, a lot more relaxed.
You know what I've noticed about cross-cultural food connections? Every culture across the world has some version of fried bread.
You're
Honest
right.
to God, everybody has some version of fried bread, or something, or vegetables in batter, and you fry that up. Like the quintessential comfort food. Is there a cookbook? Because I would say that that's the natural progression of this. That you take all of these awesome recipes and you put them together in a cookbook.
We did that once. We did that right in the very beginning, and we also had a CD to go along with it, and it was large print. We were thinking about doing that as like a fundraiser, but I did some research online, and I asked all the people online, who are blind or visually impaired in my Facebook groups. And most people who are blind or visually impaired don't use a cookbook. Most of them just go online and get recipes. And then there are different apps that they use as well. And so we had someone come out to us and, ask if we wanted to team up with them. But it was like, well, you know what? Most of these people are telling me they don't really use cookbooks. The apps and all of the technology that we have, it's so inclusive for people who are blind or visually impaired, much more inclusive than a cookbook would be. So, but, people can always go to our website and they can get, the recipes that they've seen on our show, or that I put out a recipe and a tip every single day.
Oh, very nice. And that's a good resource. I'll have you give us the website at the very end. But the question I have been burning to ask you, what is the most complicated recipe someone has made on the show?
Oh my God, this is really funny. the lady made pizza from scratch. Now, that was on our PBS station in South Florida. And it was funny because I'm in the other room. I'm on the headphones. She's in the front with our host, with Alan, right? And when you're cooking on TV, I'm sure you know, you're not cooking the way you're cooking, like if it's a Saturday afternoon. You just sort of pretend, and you load the things in, and then at the end you show people what you've created. What she did was cooking in real time. It took 45 minutes to do her whole recipe, and I kept saying in Alan's ear, Alan, I go, tell her just to pretend to do these things, because you can't sit there and wait for the yeast to rise in real time and things like this. So I think that was probably, it took a long time to edit that 45 minutes down, but because the whole show was half an hour. So I think that was probably the most complicated. Most of the things on the show.
It was a delicious recipe. The artichoke and mushroom toppings. Oh. Mind-numbingly good. I didn't make it, but I was salivating when I was watching, and I was saying, if all the food on that show is so good, that alone is a reason to tune in. Now, before I let you go, you mentioned that the recipes and tips can be found on your website, which is
www.cookingwithoutlookingtv.wordpress.com.
And we shouldn't forget that today is in fact Mother's Day, or this weekend is Mother's Day weekend, is maybe the better way to put it, depending on when you listen to the show. So is there someone you would like to send a bit of a shout out to, Renee, or maybe a mom or a mother figure in your life?
Well, I would have to yell really loud for my mom. My mom is in heaven, but I'll give my daughter a shout out, Lauren Morales. And, just wishing her a happy Mother's Day with Naya, Elijah, and little Edward.
Oh, that's lovely. Renee, it was such a pleasure to have you on the program. Do come back. And next time, if we can manage to swing it, we should do some cooking so we can eat the delicious food afterwards.
I would love to do that, Joeita. Thank you so much for having me. I've really enjoyed it.
That was Renee Rentmeester, who is the creator and executive producer of the Cooking Without Looking show, which you can find on YouTube and is available as a podcast. Some of those tips are absolutely amazing because a lot of the tips that you get in conventional cookbooks or on blogs, for example, are really geared to the sighted person. So they'll say, wait till the onions brown. Well, geez, that doesn't really help me as someone who can't see. And one of the things that I found so valuable in watching the show and looking at the blog is they give you tips that actually make sense to someone who can't see. They'll say, if you're low vision, you might be able to see this, but if you're blind, then maybe you should be listening for this, or you should be smelling that. And all this to say that if you are blind, you can cook with confidence and, come up with amazing food afterwards. Okay, I have officially made myself really hungry, so I'm going to have to go so I can find a snack. But that is our show for today. Technical producer is Mark Aflalo. Ryan Delahanty is the coordinator for AMI Audio Podcasts. Andy Frank is the manager for AMI Audio. And I've been your host, Joeita Gupta. Thanks so much for listening. Oh, and I almost forgot. Happy Mother's Day to my mom as well. Okay, now for real. Thanks for listening.